This past March was supposed to have been the first ever edition of the famous Biennale photography exhibition in Germany without any European curators. But it didn't happen. It was cancelled last November because one of the three Bangladeshi co-curators, the legendary photojournalist Shahidul Alam, who has had his work shown at MoMA, the Tate Modern, the Pompidou, well, he intensely criticised Israel's assault on Gaza, comparing it to the Holocaust and accusing Israel of a genocide against the Palestinians. That was enough for the German organisers to cry anti-Semitism and cancel the whole thing. Now, we've seen other artists and celebrities back down in the face of the anti-Semitism charge. We've seen them say nothing about the injustice and inhumanity in Gaza. But the Germans should perhaps have learned from the Bangladeshi government that it isn't that easy to silence Shahidul Alam. Back in 2018, Alam was brutally arrested in his home and detained for 107 days after speaking out against Bangladeshi government corruption and supporting student protests in Dhaka. In response, human rights organisations and prominent figures worldwide demanded his release as a symbol of the protection of journalistic freedom. He was even named Time magazine's Person of the Year for 2018. Alam was finally released in a battered physical condition, but with a conviction for justice that was only made stronger during his horrific ordeal. From establishing the pioneering Drick picture library to helping introduce email communication in his home country, Alam has been at the forefront of almost every major advance in freedom of expression in modern Bangladesh. And now he's fighting for free expression on Gaza. Shahidul Alam joins me now. Thank you so much for coming on Mehdi Unfiltered. Good to see you.
Great to be here. I mean, I've been looking forward to your program.
Thank you. You lost the Biennale in Germany, which would have had a first non-European curator. A big deal in many ways, but you lost it because you wouldn't tone down your criticism of Israel on social media. They asked you to tone down the posts. Do you have any regrets looking back on what went down last November?
It was a fabulous show we were putting together. My co-curators, Munim Wasif, Tanzim Wahab, and myself, we worked really hard to put together a show that would have been very different. I mean, the whole point in inviting initially me and me inviting the others was to bring about a change to the way they'd always done it. But of course, one looks at it and realizes what they wanted was a token darky. What they needed was someone who would be non-European, but still follow the European scheme of things. In my case, I was pro-Palestinian for a very long time, way before they invited me, so they knew what they were doing. But of course, 7th of October changed things.
Shahidul, I was amused to see the German organizer of the Biennale say in the media about you, and I quote, "He sees himself as an activist and demands freedom of expression." Forget activists. Aren't all artists supposed to demand and practice freedom of expression? They sound surprised.
That's the very point of what we do. But here is the irony. I think they want people to be different, and they were clamoring for being able to be somehow different from what they'd been. But, you know, you want a radical who actually obeys the rules, their rules.
Their rules. You recently returned your honorary doctorate to the University of Arts London, UAL, in solidarity, you said, with the college students protesting on campus against the genocide in Gaza. Is that your way of practicing resistance, of not normalizing what is going on right now in the Middle East?
I'm horrified by what's happening, what Western media is doing, what world leaders are doing, including what many Gulf countries are doing, sadly. But for me, there is still a sense of hope because of what's happening in the streets, in the campus, in the United States, in Britain, and in many other countries. And I think what the students are doing is exemplary, and it is Vietnam being revisited. I can do very little. There was this honorary doctorate which I'd been given, but the fact that at the University of Arts London was behaving the way it did meant that I had to distance myself. I couldn't continue to be holding an honorary doctorate from them and still ethically be fair to myself for my cause.
What is your advice to other artists, photographers, journalists, people in the cultural world when it comes to dealing with this issue of Gaza that a lot of people want to run away from? It's too controversial, it's too scary, it could end up with them being cancelled, it could deprive them of job opportunities, it's not the role of artists to be political. What is your response when you see Hollywood's reaction or your fellow photojournalists' reaction to what's happening in Gaza?
I think as an artist, you have to be true to yourself. And in a time like this, we have to ask ourselves which side of history we're on. Years from now, we will be asked questions by future generations. How did you let it happen? It happened on your watch. And I think artists are no different. I think everyone should be resisting at a time like this. In terms of the material losses that you could have, I recognize that some of it might be true, but then we chose to become artists.
You could have been a banker.
Exactly, or a second-hand car salesman. You probably make more money that way. But at the end of the day, if you're a journalist, if you're an artist, I think the onus is upon you to be following your convictions. And if you're not doing that, I don't believe you're an artist.
On the whole, your journalistic focus, your photojournalistic focus, has been skewed rightly and impressively towards the lived experiences of people on the ground, refugees, protesters, labourers. On the other hand, your cultural commentary, your political commentary has trended towards calling out broad institutional injustices, Western biases in the media, as you mentioned, corruption in the federal government in Bangladesh. Where do you find the overlap between these two perspectives, these two approaches?
I talk truth to power. And in such extreme inequalities, my allegiance is towards the people, and the people I need to question are the people in power, and that's what I do. I mean, I live in a country where 30 million people haven't had a chance to vote in 15 years, and we still call it a democracy.
The government would say there were elections last year.
Oh yes, dummy elections. So you had opposition, government people in opposition and government people in power. Oh well, effectively in power. But the point is, you know, there wasn't an election in 2014 where they had 52% of the seats before they got before the elections took place. In 2018, the votes took place the night before. They did come up with a novel solution. Here, they had planted an opposition, and everyone on paper it was fine. But the people were robbed. But the people did vote intelligently. They boycotted the elections themselves. And through that, they exercised the only option they had by saying no.
What is the human rights situation in Bangladesh right now?
It is the worst it's ever been, which is incredible when you consider that we've been through a genocide. And that this is a nation that has fought so hard for the liberation of its people. I think the people who made this country, who freed this country, would turn in their graves if they knew what was happening today.
Wow. And you, of course, are not speaking in an abstract way. You've been on the receiving end of some of this authoritarianism. While you speak out for Gaza globally here in Washington, D.C., you're still being chased by the Bangladeshi government, by the authorities back home. What are you charged with? What is your current legal status? What is going to happen to you 6 years after you were dragged from your home?
I was charged under Section 57B, the ICT Act, for I think what they called it, I've forgotten the exact term, but I was reporting on the student unrest, and that is what got me into trouble. The fact that you had armed thugs supported by the police attacking unarmed students was something any journalist would talk about. But of course, initially on the 4th of August, I got beaten up, my equipment smashed. I went back to the streets on the 5th. I continued reporting. I gave my report on Al Jazeera. That night was when I was picked up, tortured, blindfolded, handcuffed, taken away. But the point is, that law that I was picked up on was repealed over 5 years ago. Okay. The law that replaced it, DSA, was repealed. So this is a second-hand law, a third-hand law, which no longer exists.
You haven't been exonerated or had charges dropped.
The charge sheet has not been framed, the trial has not begun, and I still end up in court every month. I was there 5th of June, I'll be there 10th of July. And this...
What could happen to you?
Technically, I could face 14 years in prison if convicted. I don't think, I hope it will not happen, but of course, that is what constrains my life.
Well, we appreciate you travelling and coming to speak with us. I do have a question about social media, which has changed a lot of things in many ways, good and bad. What do you make of the role of social media in our current struggles for justice, for resistance campaigns, because big tech has done a lot of censorship. It's platformed a lot of fascists. In somewhere like Myanmar, Facebook has been accused of being complicit in the genocide against the Rohingya. But you have used social media to really disrupt and provoke. And the Bangladeshi government came after you during those protests because social media posts, the German conference organizers, festival organizers didn't like your social media posts. What do you make of that double-edged sword that is social media right now?
I decided to become a photographer at a time when I recognized the power of the medium. That was many years ago. Had I been starting today, I would have taken on social media and AI, because those are the tools of today. Western media has abdicated. Mainstream media has abdicated in my country and in the West. And at that point, at that stage, what are the tools available to you? And I think social media, despite all its flaws, despite its lack of veracity and whatever else, happens to be the one outlet that the average person has. And I think that is what gives us hope. The other part is it's the youth who use it more. And today, when I see the youth protesting across the globe, it is social media that they're using. Power to them.
Power to them indeed. We think mainstream media has failed in many ways too, which is why Zeteo exists. Shahidul Alam, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
And that's our show. Mehdi Unfiltered will be back next week. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to Zeteo. For now, from me, goodbye.